All right, everybody. My name is Chip Zimmer. I'm with the Kentucky Division of Water, and I just wanted to welcome everybody to the August edition of the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. Today's host is going to be Megan Shergowski, who is the interim state climatologist. So I am going to turn it over to her.
Thanks, Chip. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see a good crowd here today. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Just some general information that we share every time. This webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with NIDIS and the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. The production and delivery of the webinar reflects the contributions of many partners across the Commonwealth and in our national partners as well. The next regularly scheduled webinar will be on September 2nd, the first Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing after the fact. It is also currently live streaming on the YouTube channel for the Kentucky Climate Center. And if you need to look back, you can refer to the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel for the webinar archive. Just real quick, the background here is from our Todd County, Kentucky Mesonet station. And it's a beautiful shot of this high precipitation storm that we saw on July 16th in the area. And these type of storms were very common across the state over the past few weeks in July. And so you'll kind of see that as a repeated note throughout this presentation. We'd like to highlight the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter again. There is the Survey 123 app that you can do impact reporting on, as well as the story map through which you can actually see the impact reports. And I'll show an example of the story map here in a little while. So just a brief outline of what the webinar will cover today. As usual, we will cover the recent conditions, brief touch on temperature and precipitation, soil moisture, stream flow, flooding, and the potential for drought. The impacts that we've seen, agricultural impacts. Matt Dixon could not be here today, but he provided a good slide that I'll share with you in a little while, as well as the outlooks for precipitation and temperature, and a summary followed by questions and discussion. So over here on the left, many of you may have noticed the smoky and hazy sunsets that we've seen lately, in particular in the mid to late July, from all of the smoke that is transported from Canada and California. So the top picture here is from our Clark County Mesonet station. And this is a day when there were no clouds. And so I personally was very amazed at how much the smoke was inhibiting the sunlight. But it was absolutely beautiful. I hope everyone had an opportunity to see the beautiful redness of the sun at sunset. Also on the bottom is a shot from our Breathitt County station that's in Robinson Forest. And it's a shot of a thunderstorm anvil off to the southwest of the station. So we'll go ahead on into the precipitation, review of the precipitation from the past 14 days. So this is a radar estimated precipitation background with the observed Kentucky Mesonet observations on top. And I want to point out that the scale is not very clear on how significant some of these areas are. You'll notice that there are a couple dots of white in the middle, but those actually should be probably just a little bit bigger. We have this area of areas in central Kentucky and northern Kentucky that haven't really received rain over the past 2 weeks. However, if you look at eastern Kentucky, there's been quite a bit. And unfortunately, most of that has happened in just 1 or 2 rain events. It hasn't been a nice steady rain. It has been a flash flooding event. So to highlight that a little bit more, I wanted to bring over the Kentucky Mesonet rainfall totals from the event that happened last week. This was Thursday evening going into Friday morning. And you'll notice that our station up in the far northeast had 4.78 inches. That is Lewis County. And unfortunately, we actually lost our rain gauge at the station because it rained so much. So it's possible that we had more than that, but I think that that's the true total. You'll also notice another slightly pink area to the southwest of that, and that is Nicholas County. And they received 4.07 inches of rain during that rain event. And keep in mind, this is a 12-hour total. Not just that, but most of that rain happened within 1 or 2 hours of that 12 hours. So I'll touch on this a little bit later, but the Nicholas County rainfall did actually lead to action from the governor. Looking again at precip, the 30-day total, again, the scale makes it a little hard to see what the values are, but it does highlight over in the northeast part of Kentucky, we did see pushing 8 inches of rainfall in the past 30 days. And as you look farther to the west, you do see in, I think that's Shelby County, 1.86 inches of rain, which is actually significantly lower than the rest of the area, as well as a lot of areas that are reporting under 3 inches of rain. Looking at the 60-day, again, the eastern section of Kentucky is highlighted with this heavy amount of rainfall. We have many that are above 10 inches for the past 60 days, as well as a good portion of the rest of the state actually under, well under 10 inches. 90-day rainfall totals, basically the same story. However, this does start bringing in some of the below normal precip that we saw in May. So most of these numbers did not change from this 60-day total to this 90-day total because of that. Looking at the monthly to seasonal precipitation, the percent of normal, keeping in mind that the normals have changed. They were the 1981 to 2010 normals, but now they have shifted to the 1991 to 2020 normals. And for the most part, that means with regard to precipitation that the baseline has increased just a little bit. And with temperature, it has increased just a little bit as well. So looking at these individual maps, we have the general areas of rainfall that have shown up in the past few slides. We have Western Kentucky that has about 200% of normal, as well as the section in Eastern Kentucky that also has basically 150 to 200% of normal. So that unfortunately, again, has been a repeat of high precipitation storms that have caused this. And as a result, that has caused flash flooding while other areas in the state have remained dry. Even within a county, you'll have one part of the county that has had flash flooding, but the other part of the county has been completely normal. However, again, talking at the 90-day level, we do have more of those dry conditions that are starting to show up because of the drier conditions that we had in May. Thankfully, it seems like even though we are getting these bursts of rain, we are seeing an increase overall. This is another slide that I wanted to throw in to maybe help put the year in perspective a little bit. So this is the departure from normal, not percentage of normal as the last slides were. And this is from January 1st to today. And again, this highlights that Eastern Kentucky area where they have had that significant amount of rain, keeping in mind that this does include the significant rainfall that we had in late February and the beginning of March. You see in the portions of the bluegrass and eastern climate divisions, they are experiencing 6 to 10 inches more than normal. That's not percentage wise, that is actual inches higher than what is normal for year to date. You can also see that in western Kentucky, and basically stretching from Christian County over to Warren County. On the other end of that, you can also see areas near Evansville and over near Ballard County and McCracken County that are slightly lower, as well as the area in south central or southeastern Kentucky, which will get hit on several times in the next few slides. So looking at the temperature differences, I know our main focus is precipitation, but it's important to hit on the temperatures because it's a whole system. So looking at the temperature departures from normal, the average minimum temperatures were mostly at normal across the state. However, there were some pockets of above normal minimum temperatures. And that's on top of the increase that we did see with the change in the normals. So if this was compared to the 1981 to 2010 normals, it would probably be a little bit more pronounced. But because of that shift, it does highlight some of these other areas. Looking over at the maximum temperature departure for me, we've actually had lower than normal average maximum temperature for the month of July. So while we had those pockets of really hot days that are really humid, in the end, it actually it averaged out that we were cooler than normal. I know the past few days have been amazing, but those aren't counted here. I know I've been appreciating the low humidity and low temperatures in the day. Looking at the standardized precipitation index, again, just to review what that means. On the short time scales, the standardized precipitation index is used to, it's pretty closely associated with soil moisture, but as you look farther out, it's associated with groundwater and reservoir storage. So basically short-term changes and long-term changes. And as you can see here, I have 30, 60, and 90-day maps for both the region as well as Kentucky itself. And I included the regions here just because the weather doesn't stop at borders. And so it's important to see what's happening on the other side of the state. So across most of the state, we're seeing right in the middle, that green color. However, you do see the red bullseye in eastern Kentucky, and that shows up in just about everything. And so that is one of the areas that we are watching closely for the potential for drought development. And as we move forward in the month of August, we do want to keep an eye on that area. They did receive some rain over the past couple of days that might help ease that, as well as the drought monitor that we'll talk about in a minute. The modeled soil moisture and groundwater, this generally displays the moist conditions that we're seeing across the state, but it also does point out a few smaller spots of dry conditions that we're seeing near the Louisville area. And that is reflected in the stream flow maps that will be coming up in a minute. You can also see in West Virginia, and Virginia in particular, the conditions there are much drier than normal. And that's part of what is feeding into this, these drier conditions that we're seeing in eastern Kentucky. So talking about the stream flow, the USGS stream flow or stream gauges that we have across the state, at the 7-day average, there are a few spots that are having below normal or much below normal stream flow. I don't know if there is an explicit reason for that, if there could be some local things that are coming into play there. However, you can see that up by the Louisville area in the middle, it does show that there are a handful of stream flow gauges that are having below normal and much below normal. Also spotted near the Lexington area, as well as in southwestern or south central Kentucky from Warren, Hartford, and so forth, as well as eastern Kentucky. And this generally reflects what we just saw in the last slide as well. Looking at the 28-day average for stream flow, most of that evens out. However, there are still some of those below normal dots that are just over the border in Virginia. So overall, it seems like things are getting slightly worse. It evens out over the 28 days, but it is something that we need to be watching closely. Current flooding, there is no flooding across the state at the moment. However, with as we said earlier, the high precipitation storms that we can see across the state can cause those momentary flash flooding events, but overall, there's no flood stages going on. Here are the a select few of the Kentucky Mesonet soil moisture maps. I wanted to pick a couple that were from areas that did not see rain, as well as a couple that had flooding conditions. So the two on the left are from Webster County in western Kentucky and Carroll County in northern Kentucky between Louisville and Cincinnati. And you can see from the general trend for those, they did not change very much. They have stayed relatively steady or had a slight decline depending on the depth. The shallower sensors that we've had, the 2-inch sensor is almost at 0% water fraction by volume. So that means that it is really, really dry in those areas, and even just below the surface at the 4-inch sensor that we have at those stations, it's still pretty dry. So keep in mind that this percentage is it's not out of 100. It's generally out of about 60 or 70, depending on the soil type. So keeping that in mind, in those drier areas of the state that haven't really seen rainfall, looking at the right two, where we have Lewis County that I've pointed out earlier in northwest or northeastern Kentucky, as well as Nicholas County in the Bluegrass region, not incredibly far from Lewis County. And you can see these sharp increases just after where it says July 29th, where it's going into overnight into that next morning. And that's a immediate reaction to the rainfall. The interesting thing is you will see that on the bottom, Nicholas County generally resolves soon after that. It starts decreasing once the flash flooding has receded. I mean, however, the one at the top, Lewis County, has stayed relatively high up until for several days because it had flooded waters in the area. Again, I mentioned earlier that we lost our precipitation gauge. So when our technicians went out to see the station, it was actually 3 to 4 feet of water estimated. So that explains why we had quite a bit of soil moisture there. So overall, again, these areas that have seen rainfall, they are getting rainfall, but then they are starting to dry out again pretty quickly. Moving on to the evaporative demand drought index. So this is a description of how thirsty the atmosphere is. And again, you will see this bullseye that is in southeastern Kentucky and the far western part of Virginia. And so as this area continues to not get as much rain, the atmosphere is wanting all of the moisture that is in the ground. And so everything that is evaporating from the ground is basically getting absorbed by the atmosphere. So you'll also notice not just that bullseye, however, over the past week, portions of the bluegrass area have started, it is this this orange and light orange color, meaning that it is getting, there is an increase in the evaporative demand of the atmosphere. So I know Chip is up in, I think the Frankfurt, Georgetown-ish area, and he's mentioned that his grass is not very happy right now. I know down here in Bowling Green, my grass is about the same, and both of these areas have this orange color. So keep an eye out, especially as we'll talk about in a little bit, the outlook of high temperatures coming. So moving over to the U.S. Drought Monitor, we have we definitely do not have the conditions that the far west of the U.S. has, and it's an unfortunate amount of the United States that is in this extreme and exceptional drought. But Kentucky is mostly in the clear because we do keep getting these few rounds of rain periodically. But again, notice that there is this area of abnormally dry conditions in eastern Kentucky. Looking at the change from 4 weeks ago, South Central Kentucky did have a little bit of abnormally dry that has improved, as well as the area from about Paducah up to Louisville that has improved as well. The area that has degraded, again, is that area in southeast Kentucky that has been seeing abnormally dry conditions. We are hoping that it will improve with this next week. A closer look at Kentucky here. You can better see the current abnormally dry conditions in southeastern Kentucky. Again, the rainfall within the past day or two should help relieve that in the next update. However, there's quite a few things that go into that report. So I mentioned that I would show you the story map from the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. So here is a snapshot of the impacts. There have been 2 impacts submitted to date. One of them was in March, and one of them was on July 20th, and both were in Scott County. And it's important to note that these impact reporting, the reports should be for any kind of weather. It should be dry, wet, normal, anything that shows an impact. And so the one on July 20th reflected the wet conditions that they were seeing in the area. I didn't notice that there were any pictures that went along with it, but I know that again goes back to what we've talked about with these periods of heavy rainfall. So I encourage you to get Survey 123, submit some of the impacts that you see, and contribute to citizen science, because it helps us get a better feel for what is going on across the state, as well as a result, that means that we are able to issue appropriate warnings for different areas. So looking at the severe weather that has happened across Kentucky, this is from January 1st to date. And this is a count of the severe thunderstorm warnings and the tornado warnings. So you'll notice that 2021 is toward the bottom. It is a gray rectangle. And this is about half of what 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, the past several years, the most recent year that was close to us is 2013. And I think that says a lot. It's very interesting because It's significantly lower than these most recent years. However, if this included flash flood warnings, this could look completely different because there has been an increase in the flash flooding over the past year. So looking at the storm reports that we've seen over the past 30 days, there were numerous rounds of high precipitation storms that we've touched on throughout the month. They've caused flash flooding, most notably in Eastern Kentucky. That's a significant threat in Eastern Kentucky, period, but they've had it pretty rough this past month. The funnel cloud was reported in the Western Kentucky in McLean and Hopkins County. There were no touchdowns reported there, so no damage or anything. There have been scattered severe wind gusts that we've seen and damage. Those represented by that little tree that's blowing in the wind. So we've had a lot of very spotty storms, nothing incredibly widespread overall. So to touch on the Nicholas County flooding that has happened for that July 29th and 30th. On Tuesday of this week, August 3rd, Governor Beshear declared a state of emergency for Nicholas County due to the flooding. And as a result, he's requested further assessment from FEMA, and the Kentucky Department of Emergency Management is working to get additional assessments. And I know that they've done that a couple other times. I know Powell County is another county that has had a state of emergency for this kind of flooding. So we're hopeful that they will be able to get the assistance they need, as well as get to rebuild as they need to. So jumping over to the ag impacts, again, this is provided by Matt Dixon with the UK Ag Weather Center. The weather has overall been very kind to Kentucky in their agriculture sense for much of the growing season. We are now starting to see a little bit of dryness in the state. There is shallow soil moisture starting to decline, as well as other portions of the state really needing some good rain. We did see that a few minutes ago with regards to the Kentucky Mesonet soil sensors. The graph on the lower right shows the topsoil moisture surveyed by the Kentucky Crop Report, and we're definitely going in the wrong direction, with nearly 30% of the state now reporting in the short category. This is especially the case across portions of central Kentucky that missed out on any of the rain that has happened in these very spotty storms that have happened the past couple of weeks. Combining that with dry conditions this week, it's a bit worrisome. This would especially be the case for any late planted corn that may still be in pollination or some of the pastures. We'll most likely have to start talking about upgrades to the drought monitor next week, especially with summer heat on the return. I believe we're lucky though that the first half of July was so wet that it replenished the ground moisture. Despite dry weather returning to the area, the latest Kentucky Crop Progress and Condition Report shows all crops continuing to run predominantly in the good category and very little in the very poor category. Saying that though, July did bring bouts of high humidity and the typical threat of diseases. We had heat indexes very, very high for a good portion of the past couple of weeks. That's what's made this past week so refreshing. One of the more talked about is the southern rust of corn, which is this bottom left photo. That has led to a lot of fungicide spraying. There's also talk about fall armyworms harming double crop of soybean and forages. The heat and humidity also created stressful conditions for livestock. I know that last week we saw a few days of the low to middle 90s, and the livestock heat and stress index jumped into the danger category across the state, but also the emergency category for many across Western Kentucky. The Kentucky Mesonet saw several Western Kentucky mesonet stations with heat indexes pushing 110. Some were slightly over that. So it was really rough in the western part of the state. The outlooks don't seem to have a high confidence of above normal precip anytime soon. So coupling that with the above normal temperatures, it is not looking good. So pray for rain. So moving on to the outlook section, the 7-day quantitative precip forecast keeps the rain mostly out of the state. These green colors are less than 1/4 inch of rain. So unfortunately, we may not see the rain we need in order to keep things green across the state. The 6 to 10-day outlooks show a significant probability of above normal temperatures across the state, as well as a normal to slightly above normal chance of precip in the northeastern part of the state. Looking at the 8 to 14-day outlook, again, there is a significant probability of above normal temperatures, normal to slightly above normal. However, normal to slightly above normal precipitation. However, if there is a slight shift of pattern in the weather patterns, we might have this below normal chances edge into the state as we move forward. The monthly outlook for August, looking at the month as a whole, equal chances of temperature, as well as a slightly above normal chances for rain. This, given looking at from the past to the 8 to 14 and the 6 to 10, showing that they are relatively at or above normal, slightly above normal, indicates that this is probably in more toward the second half of the month. The seasonal outlooks, again, we have this above normal temperatures. Looks like we might be easing out of it just a little bit as we move to September and October. And again, the slightly above normal chances for precipitation. Looking at the monthly stream flow outlook, there are still some areas that may remain below normal stream flow in August. However, these areas are the ones that are having trouble right now too. So we have one in South Central Kentucky near Warren County, as well as over in Eastern Kentucky. We have some that are in Pike County and in that area. So we want to keep an eye on the rivers, and again, hoping that we will see the rain that we need. The seasonal flood risk outlook, again, no significant threat for flood risk. However, again, whenever we have these high precipitation storms, they can cause flash flooding in certain areas. The significant wildland fire potential, Kentucky is pretty out of the woods here. There is not it is a below normal chance for significant wildland fire potential. So thankfully, unlike the northwestern part of the country. So in summary, the high precipitation storms that we've had across the state have led to flash flooding in some areas, particularly in eastern Kentucky, but there are also some areas over there that are seeing abnormally dry conditions near the West Virginia and Virginia border. Hopefully, some of the rain that we have seen within the past week does start to ease that up a little. Temperatures for July were mostly at normal, with average minimum temperatures slightly warmer than normal. The Kentucky agriculture status is currently good. However, the high temperatures that we are forecast to see, combined with the reduced rainfall, may cause problems for select crops and livestock. Looking at August, the temperatures will likely trend normal, but then have this normal to slightly above normal chance of precipitation. So with that, I will throw it back to Chip. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Megan. I just want to remind everybody that our next webinar will be September 2nd. Again, it's always the first Monday of the month, or sorry, not Monday, first Thursday of the month. I'm thinking Matt is back to hosting again next week, but or next month. So, but we'll figure that out when we get there. And if you ever have questions, feel free to email myself or Bill Caldwell at the Division of Water. If you have agriculture questions, talk to Matt Dixon at the UK Ag Weather Center. And you can also talk to Megan at WKU. And again, please use the drought impact reporter, especially when we're getting into a situation like this where we're getting dry really fast. It really helps to pinpoint where some of that dryness is, through your reports. So it's really important. So please take a few minutes to use it. Anytime you're out and about, especially county extension agents when you're out in farms and stuff like that. And with that, if anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat. Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
I appreciate it. I was wondering, would just taking a picture of my lawn each week be sufficient? Because when I look at the corn fields and stuff like that, I don't know if just flying my drone up and getting a general overview, if that tells you anything by looking at corn, or a close-up of the corn, or if it's more the height of the corn. I feel like I feel more confident that my lawn indicates something than what I could possibly communicate, not being a farmer. So I was just curious, what in a farm field is a general person could document?
For the farm, really just getting a picture of just the corn plants in general, from the side is usually the best. You can pick up the leaf curling and stuff like that. Really, once we're getting into this time of year, a lot of it has to do with the filling of the ears. So it's really kind of hard to take a picture of it without going in there and actually messing with the ears of corn, which I'm sure the farmer would not appreciate unless if it's out your field. And lawns work too. I mean, lawns are obviously are a very short-term indicator. They're especially if it's a newer subdivision, they tend to brown up pretty quickly. But pastures if you have pasture fields, you can take pictures of on a weekly basis. They tend to be a little more robust, but that's another good area to take a picture of, just a local horse or cattle farm.
I do have a floodplain area along the North Elkhorn Creek that's right across the street. That might be, that big open field of grass might be a little bit better since it's in a low area and it's right against the creek.
Definitely, yeah. If it's something, every week that you can get a picture of, that'd be great.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
All right. Anybody else? I see we've got a comment about E-Town is now at day 20 without any measurable rain. So,
Yeah. I know here in Warren County, we had a few hundredths of an inch that came on the 26th, but then that was just about 3/100 of an inch, so hardly anything. And the most significant rain before that was on July 18th. So it's been a while here too, and it's showing.
This is exactly how 2019 started.
Yeah, it's actually made me very concerned about that. I probably should have talked about that a bit more, but it really does feel like how August was shaping up for 2019. So next month might be a really interesting webinar.
Yep.
And one thing to note too is that in the case that we do see conditions significantly worsening quickly, we have the ability to do another webinar. So keep an eye on your email. We may do one sometime before September 2nd in the case that we do start seeing those conditions deteriorate even more.
And yes, the answer to that comment, yeah, it's definitely setting up to be another flash drought.
Yeah, especially
doesn't mean it'll happen, but it's definitely setting up that way.
Yeah, especially with the high temps that are expected to come around. If there is not precip accompanying that, it's going to be rough to put it.
The one thing, keep your fingers crossed, because one system coming out, one of the tropical system coming out of the Gulf, gonna erase it all real quick.
Absolutely.
All right.
Any other questions or comments?
All right. I guess we'll see everybody next month, unless we have to schedule something in between there. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.